From Sunset Beach, Hawaii, weighing 267 pounds, the magnificent Muraco.
Why is it they call him magnificent?
The man who lifts condominiums off his chest.
Anything that's explosive, anything that's exciting, Prince of Darkness, Master of Destruction, perpetrator of violence. Get ready! I'm gonna burn this place down!
Hello and welcome to the latest instalment of Don Muraco's magnificent podcast. My name's James, and I would kindly invite you to go to Instagram, Twitter, and all those other places, donmuraco.com, for all sorts of stuff. I mean, I do these intros; they get worse every time, and that's pretty much all I can add to it. Apart from, instead of throwing to Don Muraco like I normally do, like here he is, the Beach Bum, here he is, the Rock, here he is, the Magnificent One. Here he is, the birthday boy. Yeah, it was 3 days ago as we record, but it's the birthday boy. It's the magnificent birthday of Don Muraco. Happy birthday.
Oh, all right. I just took my pointed hat off of me. That was a nice one. It was nice. Yeah, family remembered.
Yeah, you were frog marched to a restaurant and you were fed steak and wine all night.
Yeah. They peeled my grapes for me.
Do you know, I've brought this up before, but so many people keep writing on the comments. You are 72 now, I believe, and so many, I imagine, balding commenters are so annoyed that you've got the nicest head of hair at 72. The jealousy that I see on the comments.
Yeah. About ready to get shaved off again.
What a waste. The hair's wasted on you, I'll tell you. And you were telling me before what you had for your birthday. It sounded like an iron lung.
Well, stuff. Yeah, the cryogenic, the freezing. My wife's. I'm a guinea pig. I'm going through all the the freezing, and then come out with a ultrasound or ultra red. Thing for my, for your muscles and stuff. Oh boy,
they're off.
They have to walk right next to the gate here, and instead of walking across the street in the bike path, they walk next to this. And the little girl, my wife is supposed to come back home, but she gets lost.
Well, just going back to the iron lung thing then. So it sounds like one of the, like Mr. Burns' de-ager, like to cheat death for another week.
Probably, yeah. takes everything off with the wrinkles, I suppose.
I just like how they so they bought you basically a tube. Have they actually bought you this, or is this like to a beauty parlor sort of place to? Yeah, pretty much. It's like I guess they got the idea from me as I started about 20 years ago. I can never buy my wife a present that's worth. I can get this cheaper on Amazon. Or I can get that 2 for 1 here, and everything. I said, forget it. I go out. I get the gift certificates for a day spa. So her and my daughter, my son's wife, they each get one. They get a gift certificate or a bottle of Chanel, and they get another, timely gift certificate. So that's my Christmas shopping. Is the grandkids, $100. And if they need something, if they need anything, my wife goes and shops for it. I pay for it, but my wife gets everything, But for me, it's just a straight 100. I found my oldest grandson. He's got like $700 saved from all the Christmases and birthdays. And I said, what? Yeah, he wants to open a bank account, but nobody's taking him to the bank. So he's everybody's cashing in. So I just give him the grandkids get the 100 or whatever plus whatever they need. They're spoiled. Everybody's spoiled. Everybody. So here, back in my day, it was an apple and an orange and a smack around the ear hole, and thought myself lucky. Actually, my granddad used to smack me every year, and he always said that's for something bad you'll do in the future. So that was a lesson learned, and obviously not to go around his house on my birthday. I
always had nice Christmases. My parents were real good.
Yeah. I should say my granddad was great, but I don't want to paint him out like a tyrant.
My mom could cook. Oh God, could my mom cook? She was. My dad was Italian. He went to. D. Smith. Went to Niagara Falls where all the Italian relatives and stuff were, and she learned there. She never cooked there, but she came back and now she cooked as she could cook as well as anybody.
What was the special?
Yeah, obviously you could tell.
What?
And then I had a cousin from New York 2 or 3 weeks ago. Actually, was over here, and just so happened my wife was making spaghetti. The fast one Sunday afternoon. Just did a jar and some extra sauce and mixed it. So the Italian relatives were here. I said, I'm just looking. I said, "There's no way you're going to get it. No way you guys are getting a taste of that spaghetti." Because my cousin's looking at her. They start with the fresh tomatoes and this, and then everything is whole and fresh and organic and everything else. We're out of the jar here. That is cool.
Do you know what? Right, I've never asked you this, and this was on the questions I wanted to ask you from the first episode, and you brought up your parents. So, like, what generation Hawaiian are you? And so you said, what was it? Your mum was Italian, your dad was Portuguese. Did you say?
No, other way around.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That I was. Yeah, those are the Muraccos that I was raised. I go way back. I'm several generations Hawaiian. That's a long story that other people don't want to know about right now.
Fair enough. Then
I can cover that off camera with you. But I have a good run of Hawaiian in my bloodline, and then that's
well, someday you'll have to also tell me, because I'm sure I knew the answer at one point, but you'll have to tell me why the Union Jack flag is on the Hawaiian flag. But we'll get over that, and we'll sort of cover that at a later date, maybe. Really, so we're sort of cutting the intro short. I've not got any news to bring, because no news is good news. Because I wrote so much for today's subject, and it is, of course, superstar Billy Graham. 3 pages worth. Normally I write 2 pages for these. I've somehow just written like 3 pages worth. So we're going to go straight onto it. And Wayne Coleman, but hopefully is his real name. I think it was anyway.
So far.
Yeah, so far. He'd famously trained with Arnold Schwarzenegger. And you when did you start training?
He did.
Was it sort of like mid-60s and stuff? And did you ever get to train with any famous bodybuilders, either during wrestling or before?
I started in, I was 12 years old when I had my hips. I was 64. I started in the early 60s, I guess. I had hip surgery. I got hit by a car. We talked about that earlier when the draft, how I was on draft status, and why my draft. So I hit a car the day school back, and then it was a ball and socket joint, but my hip grew out of place. So I had to go back in, and back in those days, so God, 50-something years ago, they used to pin it in place, use pins to hold the leg in place. So that's how I got out of the draft. And so I couldn't play football, but I couldn't participate in most sports at the time. So I wanted to do something. So I started, in the ocean, and then Dean's Gym. There was a gym in Waikiki. That's where all the wrestlers train. And Jimmy Snuka was a bodybuilding champion in Hawaii Islands. And from time to time there would be guys with Jack LaLanne. I don't know if you remember him. He had the exercise show.
Yeah, I probably know more from the Simpsons and references like that, but I do know the name.
Yeah, but they'd come here for shows. The big, the Arnolds and Ed Corney was from here, and who was way back then? Steve Reeves and different. Not that many. Bodybuilding wasn't that big a scene back then. Oh, I'm gonna kill that little dog. But there was a lot, but the wrestlers, all the pro wrestlers were used to be down at Dean's and working out all the time. And, obviously diet wasn't the utmost of nobody had the 6-pack and stuff in the abs, but did abs, but didn't, the diets weren't as ultimate as they are now.
Yeah. With Wayne, I'll still call him Wayne because he wasn't superstar yet. He was trained famously in Stu Hart's dungeon, and apparently, according to many sources, he got the full treatment. He got the serious business. He got the stretching of all stretchings, maybe beyond almost anyone else. Did you ever hear stories from Superstar about his time in Calgary and what Stu did to him, basically?
No, just this. He'd laugh. He'd just talk about it, and how Billy would laugh, Wayne would laugh. Yeah, old Stu. But same thing with Hogan. You teach. Well, it's like the what is it? The give a man a fish, eat for a day, and buy him a fishing pole, and he'll learn how to. Well, that's the same thing happened to Hogan. A superstar. You teach at the time. He was one of the few 500-pound bench pressers, maybe 500 or 600, I forget which. But I think a black fella, Jim Harris, and a couple other guys around the world, if not the country, if not the world, were 500 or 600, I forget, pound bench pressers, and tremendously strong, guys like that. And so you teach a guy like that how to wrestle, how to protect himself, how to hook somebody, how to block a hook coming in, and if he's got, usually those guys have got a lot of some dog in them, like Hulk, and Hulk gets called a lot of things now, but he wouldn't, he wouldn't turn and run from a normal situation or something. He'll stand just like Billy. Billy was involved in a lot of outside of wrestling things and stuff. His brother was arrested and stuff. His family was really so. You teach these guys how to wrestle, or you teach them at least how to protect themselves. And after 5, 6, 7, 8, well, you got a monster on your hands. You got this guy that's a world-class bench presser, world-class weight, world-class strength, and now he knows his way around a little bit. You don't have to know a lot, but you have to, enough to block, guys that are skilled and talented at wrestling and stuff. Maybe somebody's going to come after you, or maybe a Robinson or a Gotch, somebody like that. But somebody else, even somebody like that. I remember Billy talking about Eric the Red, how he was, Gotch was couldn't do anything with him one time. So he ended up sticking his finger up the backside, but to turn him around, Gotch would do just about anything. But there's guys like that can protect themselves, that are taught and that are learned. So sometimes you do that, and you create your own monster. You take that Billy down to the dungeon there, and you keep him and you train him and you beat him and you beat him. And, it's like like a dog or a horse or anything else. They either fold and run into a corner, or they start biting, come back or start kicking. That's what he did.
Did you hear the story of Billy giving Stu 3 colour television sets as thank you for training him?
No.
A couple of weeks later, the police came up and asked for the TV sets back because they were stolen.
I believe, yeah, okay, that makes sense.
See, I hadn't really realised that Billy was such a rascal or Wayne Coleman was such a rascal. Have you got any stories about it? Was he just like a straight up burglar or what?
I don't know. He kept to himself. He was very, very private person. There weren't a lot of times he wasn't hanging out at night. He wouldn't, afterwards, after the matches and stuff. He never. Well, later on in New York, when he the second time when I first came in, before he was my manager, then he'd be in, he'd be around, but he wasn't, he was a very private person.
Well, he probably didn't want any accomplices or witnesses to whatever he was up to.
Yeah,
maybe. Right, so
him and Fuji are probably good friends. We shared a lot of stories.
Oh dear, yeah, probably sharing tips. Maybe, who knows? So obviously, the Superstar wasn't the first bodybuilder to get into wrestling. He was one of the first, I imagine. Do you remember any bodybuilders or just like wrestlers who, when you started watching, just had awesome bodies that you just thought, that like really captivated your imagination, thought that guy looks amazing and something to emulate?
Carpentier. Eduardo Carpentier, however you want to say it. Yeah, I thought, but he had wide hips, so he wouldn't, and his shoulders were wide, but he didn't have the hip to shoulder separation. But he was always ripped and cut. I think he was a gymnast to begin with, and then became into wrestling and trained. So, but he carried like 220, 230 pounds around. And he looked like a pretty good sized guy in the ring. He was, then there Reggie Parks. Reggie Parks was always in good shape. Tony Marino was a Mr. America. Jimmy Snuka, I told you, was Mr. Hawaiian Islands. I hate Snuka. He trained hard when he was young. When he had to get that size, but after that, he did almost nothing to maintain. He was a total genetic freak. He would eat bread, eat right, not a lot, at times if he had to, or if around, he wouldn't, I'm not eating that, or, he'd have a hamburger, he'd have, he'd eat, seemingly eat just about anything, spaghetti or whatever. But, to himself, he's a lot of salads and boiled eggs and stuff, at home and around home and stuff. But his genetics were just incredible.
So did you ever train with him? Because I know you were tag team partners with him early on in your career, so you could be seen together. So did you train with him, and did he have some like ridiculous numbers he was putting up, or was he just quite lazy?
Yeah, he didn't care. He would just get up in the morning. He had this little rubber thing, and he'd do some light, everything super light, light benches and tricep presses. I don't know how the hell he kept his legs up, because he had great legs, big cut, hard legs. I don't know how. I never saw him do a squat. Maybe a couple free squats or something to stretch out, or to. Never saw him do any squats. There was, never, and never saw him, in a gym or somewhere after his original training days, because he trained with a rugged crew with Leo Reed, whose son is the Rock's. Was the Rock's stand-in for a long time, Tanoi Reed, and then a guy, Baby Kaeo, a little, guy is about 5'4", 5'5", repping 405 down at Dean's Gym, and another guy out here, oh my God, Junior Ayu, who was a Canadian football player for I think about close to 15 years. He was a great athlete, but the money was different, and he was able to get on a couple teams there and beat the status, the citizen status, where he stayed in Canada, made a career out of it. So he was a top Canadian. So that was his crew when he started training with those four guys, and they all, they're all serious workouts. But after that, no.
I'd also like to bring, if we're talking like 60s here, I always thought Rocky Johnson had an amazing physique, and
always.
And it seemed to never really be brought up. It was almost like just expect, Rocky Johnson's in great shape.
Always had. He had a routine, always trained, always, whether it be in LA, he was always at the gym. Rocky had a routine, that he'd find some guy, that was a fan or something, and he'd make him his best friend. And then they'd schedule workout days. Okay, you're going to pick me up tomorrow for the gym. You'd always have these guys around, but he trained all the time, trained and dieted. That, like when he and Atlas were tag team partners, look at his abs and that, but just, like I said, he had Rocky trained hard. Rocky was a real smart guy. Where Atlas, he would just throw weights on, and he was just loaded with muscle. For some reason, he was just slabs of muscle upon muscle. So there's two different types of bodies there.
Yeah, and he had a really slim waist as well. So he was like competition.
Well, he was slim shoulder too.
Yeah,
he had narrow shoulders too. It's just his deltoids and his side were so big. It appeared when he stayed wide that he had a wide, the narrow whip. It appeared he had a real wide top because his deltoids and his arms are so big.
Yeah.
Rocky actually had the shape, the V shape, wide shoulders and the going to a narrow waist.
I actually brought him up because I wrote it on my script, and I can't remember if it was you. I think it was who I mentioned one time, Rick Drayson. And I think you were in the LA territory with him at one point. And he always, obviously, he was a bodybuilder. He was with the superstar Billy Graham, Arnold Schwarzenegger crew through probably the 60s. And he never made it anywhere, as far as I could tell. I think it was just like a wrestling issue.
Well, he became a T-shirt and artist. He was borderline everything. He actually went to the AWA when I first, and you think, I hated being inland or away from Hawaii. He was 10 times worse than I was about being away from California and being on the road and stuff. He was a good-looking, Hollywood, handsome guy with a Hollywood, one of those Frank Zane bodies, abs and stuff all the time, diet, abs, exact workout. He was a borderline movie star, borderline actor, borderline, just never made the transition to the main event. Why, I don't know. Not to drive, or didn't care, or would get off somewhere else. But he was certainly talented in a lot of fields, and acting, wrestling. He was stuntman. He was in a lot of things. But ended up with the T-shirts and the art out of Venice Beach there.
So was he basically, I don't know if you have the saying over there, jack of all trades, master of none.
Well, he mastered the T-shirts.
No, he mastered the T-shirts eventually. So.
He was, yeah. But right. He was there. He was legendary around the Gold's Gym and World's Gym. Down in everybody, all the Zabo and all those guys, all the top guys around there. New Drayson, everybody, everybody in Rick.
All right, good stuff then. I have unfortunately had to break out the glasses because this is a quote. So I'm going to actually read this. And this is an excerpt from Tangled Ropes. I've got quite a few of these. This is Superstar's autobiography. It came out like 2005, 2006, something like that. So after Jerry, this is Jerry Graham, left. I don't even know which one he means. I mainly worked singles matches wrestling opponents like Rocky Johnson, Earl Maynard, La Pantera Negra, Pedro Morales, and Don Morrow, later repackaged as Don the Magnificent Muraco, a young guy whose parents happened to be Freddie Blassie's landlords. What's the story about Freddie Blassie's landlords?
Well, after I graduated from high school over here in Hawaii, I went to college in California, and they sold their house. I guess they weren't really. My father retired. And they weren't enchanted with living in Hawaii. They weren't surfing or water people or nothing, So they moved to Santa Monica and got into the apartment rental business. And like their third or fourth one was when Freddie Blassie and his wife Taruko had a place over there. And my dad was because my dad was meticulous. He would, everything, if there was something out, it would be fixed. If there was this or that, plumbing or electrical or whatever, he'd fix it right away or have it done. So and that's when Blassie was. That's what Blassie was too. Blassie was really meticulous about everything. Blassie used to go down in Venice Beach to tan when the sun. And you have a timer, and you set the timer, and 15 to go off on that side, then he'd go on the other side, and he'd go to different portions of his body to tan, so he'd get an even tan, and then the timer would keep going off. He was a trip. Blassie was a very meticulous man. Clothes, car, everything, just always. That's why I think one of the reasons Vinny Jr. fell in love. They went crazy for Blassie. Blassie and Dr. Jerry Graham. Two of his biggest heroes,
idols. The Hollywood fashion plate, of course. I know, like this is about Superstar, but this is as good an opportunity as any to mention a bit about Freddie Blassie, because I think most people only know him really as a manager for the WWF. Give us some sort of more backstory about his history in LA, and was he in Roy Shire's territory as much, or was it mostly LA?
He was everywhere. He started in the South, I think, but he's one of the originals with Ricky Dozan in Japan. Yeah, he was. He brought Dozan over to. Charlie Moto was part of that, and Eileen Eaton in L.A. But Lord Blears and Blassie were the Japanese. Were the Japanese connections? They were the guys that were doing all the Japanese booking, and the talent and everything. So Blassie had huge feuds with Ricky Dozan, and matches and world champ. They created a world title belt that went back and forth between Fred and Ricky and stuff like that until Dozan died. Yep, but he was. Oh God, I don't know what kind of worker he was, because when I saw him, he was old already and didn't. But I remember him in Hawaii when I was just a little kid. At the matches, he would get more heat than he would just people just have that red heat that just use things, and the biting and the clawing and it's just what I don't know, it was an aura he had that people he just got people incensed, and he was a good one. He was a good heel.
Would it be terrifying? I mean, I'm sorry to say I don't know the circumstances of Ricky Dozan's death, but wouldn't it be terrible to? And he was the good guy. Wouldn't it be terrifying to be Freddie Blassie, the bad guy who gets heat everywhere in Japan, beating their hero? I mean, that must be taking your life into your own hands sometimes.
Well, not in Japan. The crowd is very, very modest and very, and if somebody would try to do something, I'm sure Dozan or one of his boys would come out and slap the shit out of you. He wouldn't allow. Maybe that's why they're so quiet and laid back now, because he set the stage for that. But Japan is. You can let your wife go at 2:00 in the morning. Go down to 7-Eleven and pick me up a 6-pack or something. It's no big deal. It's so safe there. I don't know now, but I haven't been there quite some time. But when I was, you just on the streets, clean. The roads are clean, everything, and safe. You could go out, anytime. Looking about getting robbed or anything. It's incredible. So working in Japan was maybe just, he and Dozan had a thing going. And then Blears. I said it's amazing how loyal Blears was with all the history he had with the Japanese and how much actual hate he had for the war and the Japs and the Japanese and stuff. But Fred he ended up marrying a Japanese lady. I can't get a couple others come to my mind now. That Taruko, I believe. Taruko's Mark Lewin's wife. I can't think, but anyway.
You said that no one ever gets robbed in Japan. So when I was there, my friend and I, had a few. He had a few more than me. We're at some karaoke place. Anyway, it's 3:00 in the morning, and I said, "Right, I'm going to the hotel. Are you coming?" And he ended up just wandering off, and he just he was so out of it. He said, "You're not my fucking dad," and then just walks into a restaurant. Then apparently he made friends with a random guy at the restaurant, and he took him. And one thing that they do in Japan still is they see the gaijin, they see the Westerners, and there's somebody outside a nice bar, and they try and beckon you in, right? And what actually happens is the bar that they're standing outside of is not the bar they're beckoning you to. They then drag you around a side street and then down some stairs. And then before you know it, you've got a beer in your hand that they charge you $30 a beer for.
Oh yeah,
yeah. They do the old switcheroo on you.
Yeah, they're clever there. They know how. A lot of those places, Singapore, Bangkok, all of those places you got to look out.
Oh yeah, I've heard some horror stories about Bangkok from a friend of mine. I'll move. Screw the camera up there. I'll move back onto Billy. And Superstar says Muhammad Ali inspired his promos. Did you ever meet Muhammad Ali?
No, unfortunately, no. He was in Hawaii. He's been a few places. There's a picture. I was near the wall there. We talked about that Ono's restaurant where the guy rode in one time there. He had his picture on the wall as well. I was underneath him. It was close to him. So he'd been to that little Ono's restaurant and stuff too. So he was around.
When I hear Superstar Billy Graham, even in the early 70s, I sort of thought he sounded quite a lot like Boogie Woogie Man Jimmy Valiant. I don't suppose they would have ever crossed paths early on. I can't imagine they would have done.
I wouldn't think so. I wouldn't know.
No.
When I met him in L.A. around 1970, 71, he was, he hadn't been around. He was just in the business, he'd only been, at Stu's and from Stu's to, I don't know how he got hooked up with New York and Jerry Graham, but he could somehow. And when he came to L.A., he had Jerry with him. And he was kind of like Jerry's babysitter, because Vince Sr. and Vince Jr. loved Jerry Graham from the old garden days. So he had his problem with the mother and the death and all those stories and stuff. So he kept trying to sober him up and get him back in the business and get him back to where he was living. And I guess he was with Terry Funk for a while and Dusty, and in their early career, and then he ended up with, I don't know if before or after, he ended up with Wayne, or Superstar. So that was, he had him.
To think that to get somebody on the straight and narrow, partnering with Terry Funk.
Yeah. And Dusty, yeah.
Oh, he'll be in bed by 10 p.m., no worries, every night.
Yeah. That's like being in New Zealand with Lewin and Curtis. If they pull the sidewalks in at 6 p.m., yet you're wandering the streets at 2 a.m. in the morning. Everything's still going. Where places are. They used to call it, in Japan, they call it the red light district, where they have the restaurants and the bars and things open, till the wee hours in the morning. That's where Curtis, that's how he followed. King Curtis followed the steps of Lord Blair's from Hawaii and Blassie and those people, where he went to Japan. And it was so crazy there. That's the fans and stuff like that. It's still Ricky Dozan days. And he was able to start that style. The Bruiser Brody, Abdullah the Busher, running into the locker room door and hit through the chairs and running, out of the ring all over the arena, having the Japanese scatter, like herds of sheep from one place to another. That was Curtis, and he was one that laid it on to Abby, and then laid it over to later on to Bruiser Brody, some of those guys that had that style. So that was Curtis style.
Tiger Jeet Singh, was he?
Jeet Singh.
Yeah. I don't know why I just felt the need to bring up his name, but he was one of the ones in Japan, wasn't he, in the 70s, who just scare the crap out of people.
Sure was, yeah. He was for Inoki. I don't know if he changed companies or not, but when I was there, he was with Inoki, and he was a big card there. So maybe 10, 12 times a year he'd go from Canada. So I think he lived in Toronto, huh?
Yeah, Ontario. I think his son lives there as well. I think they're both Canadian.
Yeah. Around that area. Is that his son, that kid in WWE?
Yeah, no. His son was Tiger Rally Singh. He was in the late 90s. He wasn't very good.
Yeah.
Are you thinking of right, I'm going to cut this bit out and then try and really think of the guy's name now. You can tell I've not watched for a long time, can't you? Oh, you've watched more than I have, I'll guarantee you. Well,
he was just on I think they're running shows in India. That's why they kept him, gave him a world title, and they put him over. And then they started to kill him off. I don't know why. if they're thinking of doing shows in India. I think I read where Hulk had made appearances there, and different guys have made it. God, what a market there.
Maybe do you know what? They started doing Indian appearances, and then all of a sudden the Saudi Arabia thing came along, and that probably took precedent, I reckon.
Yeah.
Seemed a bit funny. What the heck's his name called? He's got like, do you know what? I'm actually going to cut this bit out of the podcast, and I'm going to actually just WWE Indian. Not Macken Singh.
That's another
champion. Jinder Mahal.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Just before I pressed go, then I remembered it. But I will cut out because that's going to make me look really stupid as a podcast wrestling host who doesn't know anything about wrestling. Right. I shall move swiftly on. So it wasn't his first run. I know I've written first run here. It was his first major singles run. WWF for a superstar. Vince McMahon described him.
No, AWA.
No. I'm sorry. For the WWF, for the WWF, his first major singles run in that company. Vince McMahon Senior was willing to take a gamble on him. Vince McMahon Jr. has said once that he was so ahead of his time, many promoters just weren't willing to give him a look at all. They just didn't get the presentation. He was just so far ahead of his time.
I don't know about that. I saw a podcast or interview with Kevin Sullivan, and he was recalling Superstar's career and stuff. And about a year and a half into his title run, he was always one of those heels that you love to hate him. And given the opportunity to turn babyface, oh my God. He would have just set the world on fire. But that's the case, where you're a promoter, and you want to turn your territory loose to one guy who's so much control and has so much power, is so over he could break off at any time and start his own company, start his own. So that's and Kevin said the biggest mistake Vince Senior never made was switching. Because the business would have been ridiculous, was switching superstar to a babyface. But and yes, the business would have been incredible. But what kind? You think Hulk was a monster, and in his day was just coming into the cell phones, Metro. It was even pre hyper media. Like The Rock and Stone Cold and those guys. So Hulk was luckily he missed that Facebook era, but Billy Graham was even before that. So then he could have just by word of mouth. You got to be you got to pick your fights.
Yeah,
or pick your lovers. Because Billy he turned into babyface, no telling what he might have become. How he might, how powerful he could have been. You're just hoping, at that time, a promoter like that, you probably have to give him percentage of the territory, which McMahon's would never do. They'd have to, they'd have to give him just working off straight. I don't know what the deal would be, and then there'd have to be lawyers and stuff involved. But you'd be taking a big chance if you're going to switch him. But yeah.
Think. Do you know what? I don't know how many color TVs he stole to gift Vince McMahon Senior for the WWF title as a thank you. But why did Bruno lose it? Do you know? Was it just he was reaching the end of his career and he was done, or was it just Superstar? Just it looked like the way to go. Do you remember hearing anything?
I wasn't around then. I was, I had nothing. I had no idea. Had no input at all into WWF at the time and all that. I would imagine, Bruno with all his power and with all his popularity and stuff, and his being adamant about wanting the Pittsburgh, Eastern Ohio end of the map there. Probably from Buffalo, Erie down to Pittsburgh to West Virginia and over maybe to Columbus, Ohio. in those territories. Those were pretty good little territories at the time. And these old names, Sticker and Half, and all these old names, and I couldn't give them locations. But they ran those areas. They ran that, there's upstate New York, and, I'm probably, my guess would be that Bruno was running into problems with the Pittsburgh. She always gets back to the Pittsburgh promotion, the Pittsburgh area. But I think it was about that time, that Bruno kept pushing for more and more. Bruno had lots of money and a lot of investments, and was really invested around Pittsburgh, and could have run for God there. He was just he was hometown Pittsburgh, big Italian following, big ethnic following, big whatever, all the way around. So, and that possibly in that era, because it wasn't long afterwards that he had totally split, and then when I was there, he came back for some shots with his son, stuff like that. But he hadn't been around, and hated the McMahons, Vince Senior and Junior, everything he did, And Bruno for a while was very negative, and he's a good guy, but you see what might have been, and then you see what and it's like you wanted to be Bill Gates or just a regular 100 millionaire, It's just the Rock, the Rock or Bill Gates.
Yeah.
You want to.
Back onto superstar Billy Graham and his 19 out of 20 Madison Square Garden sellouts are a record for an entire average in main events. And it was clear that Billy was a huge draw. He was only just getting started. The interviews were great. The outfits were great. He was on all the wrestling magazines. He was the talk of wrestling. Why is it that Vince McMahon Sr. was so dogmatic and determined to not ever change his plans? He said, right, here's when you're going to win it, the WWF heavyweight title. Here's when you're going to lose it. Why would he not go with the flow and see that they could ride this higher and higher?
I'm sure he could see he's creating a monster. And he'd already had this dealing with Bruno with that Pittsburgh thing that we were speaking about earlier. So with Billy growing like that, and you got to look at how great, he had those, if not 24, pretty damn close. His arms were, and his skin was like rice paper. He just, it was just, and you talk allegedly working out with Arnold. I remember being in the old Gold's Gym on Venice that was on the street there when it was just a slop hole, just a sweat pit, this stink in the sauna bath upstairs and above, and and the weights and stuff. And I remember Arnold coming into the shower and go, Billy Graham, he does 100%, 100% weight, 100% effort, 100% back. Killing me. He was laughing, of course, because Arnold was Arnold's a psycho himself. But he and Billy used to train together, and Billy trained with him, and then he used to look up to Billy as far as training. He took care of Billy a lot too. After he got out of the second time, he got him president's thing, speaking around for cancer patients or liver patients and stuff like that. So he and Billy remained friends for a long time. Well, they still are.
With the losing of the title, Billy goes into a big depression, gets right into the pills and the drugs and everything like that, sort of numb the sadness. He couldn't really see the forest for the trees in the sense that he could have then been the challenger to Bob and then, just done it all over the circuit many times over, which it seems a shame. He pretty much retires from the business. But then by 1982, he comes back to the WWF because they dropped a W in that time. And he turns up in karate pants and also looking like his own great-granddad, despite the fact he was still in his 30s. He just hadn't hit the gym in years, it seemed. And then just come with this wacky character. What do you remember of him turning back up? Was there a personality change behind the scenes as well as on camera?
Just camera. He was pretty much the same guy. More laid back, probably. Yeah, I don't know. After his run there, he would have hit any territory he went into. I'm sure, if he could have, named his length of time and his, and what he wanted to do and call his own programs and call his own shots out. The NWA. I don't know if he wanted to stay loyal to WWF or what, what his mindset was, but he could have gone. He come from. He was with his first big break was with Vern in AWA, with him and Wahoo, and the Indian strap matches, and Wahoo was a programming maniac. Wahoo, he never. I don't know. He did for the guys my era. He was around. He was in Houston with Paul Bosch, a great payoff. He was a big card in Houston. He booked himself. In AWA, and he'd come into Florida or Georgia. He would, he'd have spots all around the country where Wahoo McDaniels really meant. And and he always produced. I mean, he was a hard worker, and he'd always boom, boom. He was pushing for a title shot, pushing for an Indian strap match, pushing for his gimmick matches like he did in the Carolinas with Mulligan and Flair and those guys. Those guys were making money hand over fist, and Wahoo and Mulligan and Flair and Steamboat, and they were just doing fabulous business. So that's what went through his mind. I maybe like the babyface thing had occurred to him in New York, where he could have just blown the lid off the whole city, and done that, and maybe that's caused for his depression or what. What I don't know, but there is potential to just continuing, or get into a promotion or, well, Billy was, he was an outlier. He was a rebel, which is pretty, he wasn't part of the NWA scene, wasn't part of the WWF scene or AWA scene. He was a talent, and he maintained the talent, not wanting to get into promotion. Because he probably could have promoted Phoenix or, that, which would have been a barren area because there's no population there. And we talk about guys with ideas like Eddie Graham and Ed Francis and Dory Funk Jr. Well, they gotta think, they gotta work because they got to pull the dollars out of these, Florida these smaller towns, Amarillo and those towns around West Texas and stuff. They got to pull the dollars out of El Paso. You got to pull the dollars out of those small population cities. Where a guy like Vern or Vince Sr., it doesn't require that much, gray matter to, you create a nice little angle, a couple stars, and you run your territory as such. You don't really have to hot shot it. You don't have guys running in on matches. Until went to the South, went to Florida, there were nobody running in on matches. That's a pretty much Southern phenomenon, to have somebody run in on your match or, get double crossed like that.
Because you mentioned him before, and I've never asked you your opinion on him or, stories about him, Wahoo McDaniel. I hear the chops are real.
Oh, yeah, it's great. I ran with him. I hung with him at AWA when I first got there. I was a kid. He was, I met Mickey Mantle. The baseball player, the famous baseball player from the Yankees. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I've heard of him, yeah.
American people, Mickey Mantle. They went to Oklahoma, and he was a fan of Wahoo's. And he was a fan. They got rid of him in New York when Namath came in because he was bigger than Namath. When the old New York Jets would play in some old broken down stadium that they were playing in Shea Stadium, I think. They go in on the tackle. Guess who? And then the whole stadium would yell Wahoo, guess who? And then New York, and then when he got traded to the Miami Dolphins down in Florida, and he had a little wrestling background, so he got booked in the Tampa office. He was working during the football. He was doing wrestling. He was working Malenko or Eddie Gray. He was working into strap matches, and even the Briscoes. You talk to Briscoes, he was their hero growing up. He was the Bud Wilkinson, the Oklahoma Sooners. They had an undefeated football run for 2 or 3 years, and he was the focal piece. One of the focal pieces of that great football team. So yeah, Wahoo was, oh God, he doesn't go down historically as one of those Dory Funk Jr. or Ric Flair or type of guys, because he was so many places. He spread himself so and he was making money everywhere. He was a wild man. He was leaving wives, a trail of wives behind him. I met him first in Minneapolis. He was married to an Indian lady, tall, beautiful lady, and he was an Indian thing. But he was just into his Indian heritage and a lot of that stuff. Yeah, good guy, talented.
Was it
He'd go all day long?
Was it a bit of an issue with pay in American football in like the 60s that wrestling paid better back then?
Oh yeah, probably. I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, football. And when I got into professional wrestling, it wasn't to become a millionaire. I mean, it was these guys here. They weren't. You weren't going. It was like the professional football in the 60s and 70s. Those guys weren't getting them. They were driving taxis and working on the docks like I did in the off season and doing stuff like they were in good days maybe 10, 12 grand a year. They're making maybe less, not even that much. And all pro, a Pro Bowl level baseball football player like that. So they weren't. That's people. Now you get into wrestling. Oh man, I'm gonna be the Rock. I'm gonna have. Before you know it, I'm going to worth $500 million and Learjet. Look, Ric Flair, what he did. Learjets and limousines and was it Space Mountain?
Kiss stealing and wheeling and dealing.
Yeah. Handmade shoes, Gucci man. Gucci suits, and which he got into is his buddy Roger's persona that he took and made real, because he did all that stuff. That's why he's still working at 73.
Yeah, because he spent it all.
Yeah,
he's still
before he made it.
I'll bring you back slightly to what I was talking about before.
Okay,
so,
Superstar.
Superstar, and with the karate thing, he said that it was really crappy, but he built up enough goodwill with the fans that they gave him a pass, basically, with the gimmick. Would that ring about true to you?
Yeah, it would sound right. And Vince Sr., I believe, he came back in, what year was he back? 92, 82?
Yeah, I think it was 82 when he came back with the karate thing, yeah.
So I think, Vince Sr. was still running the show. Well, Junior loved him as well, but he just grew tired on the road. He couldn't handle it. His liver was getting bad. He ended up having the liver transplant after that. But he was, he was getting tired. It's pretty old gimmick, and Vince did that for his guys. He could afford to, he could afford to bring somebody, down on their luck, one of his old champions or old stars in, and book them on a card, make them a couple, $1,000, $2,000 a week, and but you'd have to work for it. You'd have to make the round in those days. You have to make the loop and stuff, and it wasn't as bad then as it became later, but it was going, it was growing, and you were traveling a lot.
Yeah, I think it was like 82, 83 when
starting to bust loose.
Yeah, like California starts like getting busted wide open, and AWA is fighting for it, and WWF's fighting for it. Just one more thing on that, on the karate bit. Do you remember the storyline, the action of Billy Graham smashing up with a hammer the Bob Backlund's title belts? Were you possibly in the building when that happened for the reaction?
No, I wasn't around then.
Oh, what, 82, 83? You were there then.
Yeah, but I don't remember him. I don't remember him busting up the belt.
I know Greg Valentine did that at some point. That was earlier.
There's another guy we were talking about earlier. We're talking about foundation pieces and stuff. But I got Orndorff came in there because he unfortunately passed at the time. Well, Valentine was another, with myself, Orndorff, Valentine, Slaughter. Those were the heels that Vincent acquired, or we were the heels that Vincent acquired, kind of as a building block to move up, to move, to build his baby faces to be underneath Hulk there. So those were, that's Valentine was another solid guy. He had Backlund before I did. He had the run with Backlund, a couple guys before I did. And he was like first breaking the mold. There wasn't somebody 6'6", 350 pounds working with the champion. He was less, Bob's size, and they did wrestling, and they did a lot of mat work. It wasn't just chop.
Did you read the quote? Because Greg Valentine sort of threw you under the bus slightly in Billy Graham's book for some reason. Did you read the quote?
No.
He outed you as the Bulldogs were involved. It was the European. It was the fateful European tour.
Oh yeah. Him and when I had my blow up with Nicky.
Yeah. But it was a few days earlier, and apparently you were in a French nightclub, and you'd ingested something, you fell asleep, and then you woke up, and then a tidal wave of puke just flowed all over the place, and then you fell back asleep again.
Oh, I don't remember. Probably I can't dispute it. He just sent me a birthday wish.
Did he?
Yeah. Happy birthday. He said I was a better Intercontinental Champion than you. I said, yeah, but I was always better looking. So aloha and thanks. I got a birthday. I got a birthday aloha from him. And it's good to see Greg. He looks old and weathered like I am.
Yeah. But he's got lovely hair like you still.
Yeah. So mine's all gray and his is all bottled.
Yeah. I mean, if you've got any stories where you can throw Greg under the bus, I think this would be the perfect time to do it.
Okay, yeah, I'll try. He never really moved. He moved to once. Well, there are stories you don't tell. Those are places I don't go. But he moved to one speed, pretty much wherever he was. In Florida, he was, he had that one, and it worked for him. It worked all his entire career, where he worked, and he was true to his. He was true to that Valentine mold, where he'd progressed 30 years from JV to Greg Valentine, and he was able to Piper and Backlund, all the angles he had and the time he spent up in the WWF. So he had nothing to apologize. North Carolina, all those runs he had there in Charlotte, he had nothing. He has nothing to apologize for. He was a tremendous talent.
Who did the it's called the Flair flop, but who did the Flair flop first? Was it Flair or was it Greg Valentine? Where'd you go straight face forward?
Well, God, I don't know.
Well, we're talking.
Everybody, we were all about the same age, so we were stealing bumps from everybody back there. The Ray Stevens upside down in the turnbuckle, and I used to do the Billy Robinson punch. Let me beat down. I'd stagger out backwards and go between the second and third rope, hit the floor, and stuff like that. Everybody was. We were in the. They were a different generation, so we were kind of a Flair, myself, Valentine, a lot of the guys. That era, those guys were there. That weren't from Florida, but they were. Were stealing. Moved into the stealing bumps, stealing moves from guys. Robinson was a guy I spent a lot of time with, so I grabbed a lot of things off of him.
When you I said this. Two things. I interviewed Dan the Beast 7 a few days ago. He says hello, by the way. I told him the old line. If you borrow from one, it's stealing. If you borrow from many, it's research. So I consider all the bump things research.
Okay. Yes. So yeah. I call it my Bobby Jaggers pitch.
Why the Bobby Jaggers pitch?
Well, he knew every story. When Tez was this guy, and Tez said to this, all the way back to Gorgeous George and stuff like that, and he would recount the stories. That's probably why he had a beat with Fuji and some of those guys. He was a real gregarious fellow. I liked, I found him entertaining, but like I said, he would get with Fuji and those guys, and luckily I lived 60 miles apart from everybody. I lived in Santa Cruz down by the ocean. And they all lived in Hayward, but they'd get them, and after the matches around, everything was around Hayward, which is on the other side of the bay from San Francisco. And they'd get home after the wrestling, Richmond or San Jose, wherever, which was all pretty much in proximity. And they'd just get him so slobberly, just dead drunk, and they do all kinds of stuff to him. Send him home without clothes, or paint his car windows black. Oh my God, the poor guy.
They only do that to you if they like you.
That
was the theory, anyway.
Yeah.
There's one thing I should have mentioned with the karate thing, but I'll throw this in. It's another quote from Tangled Ropes. And this is Billy Graham writing. In Hagerstown, Maryland, excuse me, that's how you pronounce it. One night, I was so stoned in the ring that my partner, Don Muraco, not the most temperate guy himself, didn't want to tag me. When I finally got into the bout, I tried to compensate for my condition by overselling for Andre the Giant, bumping for his headbutt, then flapping around like I was having an epileptic seizure. My spastic display ruined the flow of the match and diminished whatever believability we were trying to portray. In the car later on, I repeatedly mumbled apologies while Muraco blasted me with reprimands. Do you remember that match?
No, I don't remember that. I would, if somebody was in lousy condition, you try to cover for him. That was it. It was not, didn't want him in the ring or didn't want to give him a chance. Just didn't want the guy to get in, and make a fool of himself or, look foolish. And that was, that was the way, maybe, I don't remember, maybe he remembers it that way, but I don't remember ever going off on Superstar like that. He was pretty much my senior, pretty much, genuflected in his presence.
We'll move on to his third run then. Sorry, I've got another page and a bit to go, so I will rush through quite a lot of these questions. Almost as soon as the Superstar returns, his body disintegrates. His hip goes when he's doing a bear hug on a jobber on like Superstars or Wrestling Challenge or whatever it was, and he has to go. And he comes back after a lot of vignettes of rehabbing and everything. Do you remember the injury at the time? And did he ever I don't know if you were talking to him at the time, did he ever confide in you that he was a lot more hurt than he was trying to let on?
Well, he was, he was seemed real frail and he ended up having a liver transplant. Is what he had. After that, he's carried a picture of how his liver looked like like a piece of bacon or something. It was just, it was just fried from those years of staring. He would, and like the karate pants, he would come and he was addicted to pills and stuff. And they'd have the Ramada, a little saloon downstairs, bar. You'd go in and have a bathroom on the side where you'd go in, 2 or 3 stalls. He'd take, a handful of downers and he'd go in and sit there and he'd fall asleep and lock the door. And nobody could get in the bathroom for hours and stuff. It would, you have to go get somebody, some guy and help him out of the bathroom, help him out of there. Almost like me puking in France. I don't remember that. But, France, you get with the Bulldogs, a lot of things you don't remember. And if you take your drink and you look back, there's all kinds of debris floating across around the top. You go, oh my God, what did I drink? What the hell did I just do? But that was,
it's like, goodbye evening.
yeah. Nice meeting you. Yeah, nice talking to you.
Right, so Billy comes back yet again. His body's knack. I'm using British vernacular, but he's for the knacker's yard. He's not working out physically. He can't do it. He's told he's not going to be wrestling in Survivor Series, which we're actually going to be talking about in the next episode. And then he becomes your manager, and you end up. And we will talk about this in depth at another time. We'll do a full episode on your babyface run as The Rock. Which you raise your eyebrows and look up to the sky, something you really hated, I know. But he becomes your manager, and then basically even he says that he wasn't a very good manager for you. What were your memories of him being your mouthpiece as someone who's very good at promos anyway?
Yeah, we just got started. We just got our feet wet, and then I got fired. So that was, he didn't really get a chance. It wasn't. He didn't really get an opportunity to exercise himself as a manager, and come up because those are times they were getting. They would only show up for the Garden, or maybe if you had a spectacular going at the Survivor Series, things like that were breaking down. And I don't even know if they were coming. They were showing up to those matches as well, but they would only show up to the Garden, and they'd get. Their Skolin or whoever, Monsoon they get their payoffs and their checks, and then it'd be the next night would be in Allentown. That's when Lou would get fired for swearing at the old man. It was a vicious cycle. But he just got started when I got finished.
Well, do you know what, right? This is like early November, late October 1987, and you left in October 88, so he was actually with you for a year.
Okay.
So, anyway, he basically said that he put too much of the spotlight on himself. How could he not, really, I suppose, if you're that big and that flamboyant, so...
Yeah, and he had the rap, I could do... Well, and I was a baby face, too. What the hell am I going to say? It's like Pedro Romero. I love the beautiful people here. I love everybody. And when I 2 months earlier, I'm calling all fat pigs and blowing my nose at them and stuff.
I love all of you fat pigs out there.
Yeah.
At least you got the theme song, Jesus Christ Superstar.
Oh yeah, boy. Yeah. That was, of all the songs, of all your intros, that was,
Are you telling me that you're not a big fan of musical theatre?
Not normally, no.
No, that's fair enough.
Some of them, I spent the day watching football, listening to old 60s tunes yesterday, watching NFL. 7 in the morning till about 5 in the evening.
So it's sort of a music accompanied by the theatre, the spectacle, the crucible of sport.
Yeah. Hair.
Yeah.
Watching first 3 acts of Hair.
The only one I've ever seen live is Book of Mormon, and it's technically a musical. It was really funny. It's that one with the South Park guys did, and that was a good show. That was a good show.
We used to go Broadway every once in a while when I was living in New York. That was always entertaining. That was a whole different genre.
Who had the biggest arms? You, Superstar, Hulk Hogan?
Probably me. Me or Hulk. I don't know. Hulk claimed 24s. I had a legitimate 21 and a halves. I was pretty pumped. I always had big arms to begin with. I tell you, because those crutches and stuff, the triceps and walking on crutches for months like that. So I had the triceps. And naturally, and they didn't show as big as some of the other guys, but they measured. We were in New Zealand. The guy was measuring for something, and the Viking, the Thor, Tony Holm, and there's a thing, and we were sitting there with Steve Sapello, and for some reason they're doing our arms, and my arm was bigger than the power lifters. Oh, that's struggles. Yeah, his arms are always just Strong used to call me the world's best conditioned fat man, because I was always running and surfing and working out and everything else, and all these other guys that look cut. But I always, but whenever we talk about beer, I used to enjoy my 6-pack daily in those days. Now I don't even get near beer. But
who had the biggest arms in the WWF then? Would you say you?
Yeah, right up there. Right up there, me or Hulk. Billy's had gone by that time, but I don't know what Hulk's actual measurement were, or actual size were. But, I was big. I was pretty big.
All right, so he retires from the ring in, I think, 87. I think his last match was with Butch Reed. And by 1990, his health has just deteriorated really badly. Even when he was doing the commentary, he wasn't turning up because he was getting like stuff with his ankle done and his knees and his hips and just everything, and his liver, and everything was going wrong with him. He's publicly attributed this many times to steroids. Is Superstar maybe sort of the biggest influence on wrestling as far as bringing steroids into the business?
That was the age. That was the beginning. That was the start. And it was in society. He was growing there, so he was a part. And I'm sure he'd been in the D-ball and stuff when he was doing those 500 or 600, whatever they were, those big bench presses and the other stuff. He was there. He was training pretty good. Pretty enhanced even back in those days. So yeah, I guess for wrestling, but like the whole world was changing as well. I mean, everybody had access to doctors and and drugs and stuff at that time. So maybe he was one of the first. Maybe I don't know about guys around other areas and in other territories and stuff that had that type of body, but yeah. But responsible for it, I don't know. I mean, he was. He certainly left an impression in everybody's mind in that era. Of what was what being in shape was like, being big and ripped and cut.
In the territory days, before obviously national expansion with the WWF, and then most people apparently were on it according to people who were there. In the territory days, were steroids ever really discussed, or was it just not really there at all, or was it an open secret, or what?
No, I remember coming into Florida when I was there, and a few guys, a couple guys started to get cut up and stuff. I don't know what they're taking. It was just, I don't know what they were on. Just a simple Deca. It wasn't anything heavy. But then other guys, it became in vogue after a while, and grew. But then it wasn't an issue until so maybe Billy and it just went. It was a whole society change. It wasn't I don't think you can look at him alone and put your finger. Although he was the focal point at the time and the most successful, and he was like the Ric Flair of the era. He was just people knew him. The point where Flair went out and made his name by being on the TBS TV all the time every week. He made a point to make that Atlanta TV every Saturday morning, regardless of where he was wrestling in the country. Unless it was real far away, possibly not. But if it was possible, he would be on that Atlanta TV every Saturday with a promo, and apart from what they do now, where he was a champion and he carried it, and he wouldn't be working an angle every week. He wouldn't be in his wrestling tights and like Bobby Lashley or Roman Reigns every week. Same. In fact, I watched Orton and AJ Styles a couple weeks ago because I knew, and they did the same finish they'd done a couple months before on TV, where he comes with the elbow off the rope, and Randy catches him in the DDT. I went, wow, they just did that a couple months earlier when they're building Randy up for the Bray Wyatt thing. So,
it's the problem when
that's the booking there.
Yeah, so much first-run television and about 17 wrestlers on the roster that you actually use.
Yeah.
Superstar Billy Graham falls out with Vince McMahon, probably not for the first time, I imagine. And he ends up being sort of one of the faces going on all the chat shows along with Bruno Sammartino.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember that era where it was like so vociferously just like hating on Vince McMahon, the WWF, blaming him for all his own problems, and the steroid trial? I mean, the federal steroid trial, and were you keeping up with all that at the time, and what were your impressions of
I was out of the area there. I knew Dr. Zaharian, and I knew what was going on. I knew it wasn't true that Vince wasn't putting guys on roids and stuff. And everybody else. Putski was there. Husky was one of the guys that trained. He went from that big bulky thing to lean. When I was there and he's working there, he was all lean cut and big and bulky, but still cut and and thick, and training and obviously on drugs. It was pumped.
Vince McMahon and Billy Graham, this is Junior, they keep getting back together like star-crossed lovers and then splitting up again and then getting back together again and splitting up again. What is the issue between the two? Do you know?
Probably like Senior, there's guys that he just, or Blassie or, guys that made an impression in his mind when he was growing up. Like I say, he used to drive Jerry Graham's car around New York City and stuff like that. He was a big fan of Jerry. I don't know what he did with Fred, but and Superstar. He was, I guess he was just moving into the taking over the announcing and the MC, the announcing and stuff at the Championship Wrestling and Superstars of Wrestling and that kind of stuff. He was probably just in his formative years of the interviewing and that end of wrestling. So. He probably had developed a fondness when he was running the business for Senior on a lower level,
Yeah, one of the times they get back together again for one of their brief reunions is 2004. Superstar is inducted same year as you were into the WWE Hall of Fame. The names, there's Jesse Ventura, there's the Superstar, of course, there's Bobby Heenan. I mean, that's got to be the most star-studded Hall of Fame.
Tito Santana.
Tito.
I think Greg was on that too, wasn't he?
Yeah, Greg was on that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was.
So yeah, that was pretty cool. I felt pretty. I felt pretty pumped for it. I had a lousy acceptance speech. I remember because I was, I wanted to include all the guys that had. Contributed to my growth along the years, from an old timer named Bud Rattel in Vancouver, British Columbia, and Dean Higuchi, Dean Ho, and those guys, and even before that, to Luther Lindsay, Carl Gotch, and those guys in Dean's gym in Waikiki before I even had a pair of wrestling boots. And I wanted to include that and not miss any names and stuff like that. But yeah, that was when it was starting to go. That was when it's really starting to snowball into an event, just another WrestleMania, a part of your WrestleMania weekend. Because I remember when I was there, we had the Stone Cold movie, his movie where he got put on that island and he was fighting all the time. Was it
The Condemned?
Yeah, that's the one. We had that one night, and I tell you about Detroit. How they blocked the freeways and stuff and took us all down in buses that night. The next night to the Hall of Fame, and then actually to the WrestleMania, everybody went at different times and real early. So but coming back, they did once again. But that was that era there.
So they took you to Detroit all the way to New York.
I'm thinking New York, but yeah. I'm getting them crossed, the Detroit and New York one.
Yeah.
Detroit was Fuji's.
Yes, the one where he fell asleep, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's really pumped up for that one.
Yeah. He could care less.
I will mention one more thing. Oh, actually, I'll have to mention one more thing about you. So at WrestleMania 20 in Madison Square Garden, I just like how everybody's wearing suits apart from you, because you've got a sports jacket on, but you've got a Hawaiian shirt, a cap, and your tennis shoes. I just like you just look so chill, and it's like great.
It was over. It was over. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Nobody told us to get dressed up for that night.
Did you watch any of the
and you
matches?
can get away with wearing a coat in like London or England. You can wear a coat lots of times in that time of the year because it's usually pretty chill outside. So, yeah, I wasn't a big coat and tie guy. I was lucky when they came out that the law came down from God there in Stamford, Connecticut, that we were supposed to wear. Everybody was supposed to wear coat and tie at that point, and we went. So that, fortunately, I'll get into later, but it came in the time where I was doing those Fuji Vice Bandito things, and where the Don Johnson with that jacket and stuff like that. So I was able to get away wearing just those Don Johnson kind of jackets and basically any kind of shirt I wanted underneath.
So we'll sort of shut this podcast down, but before I do, any lasting memories that we've not brought up with superstar Billy Graham, because he's a huge influence, 20 years too soon. Even in his own documentary, people call him a con man at the same time. I'm sure he was all of those things, but any extra stories you can bring to us for Billy?
Not that I know firsthand. I know his brother and Angelo Mosca's brother were close friends and involved in some type of skullduggery somewhere. But nothing that I could that I'd like to hear that probably not too personal.
Yes. Let us not forget that superstar Billy Graham is still alive and probably is very lawyer happy to sue WWE and maybe anyone else.
Could be. He's in his 80s already, I think.
I think he's about 78. I looked at him before, and yeah.
Yeah, I thought I saw some. Yeah, possibly. Yeah.
Well,
he was a good guy. He was a great guy. It was great to be around. A lot of fun. Like I said, he didn't hang with the crew as he was always pretty much by himself. And but money maker, heartbreaker.
Yeah, and what more can you say? 20 years too soon, and as soon as this podcast is over, I will ask you what Billy Graham's up to, and then I will tell nobody. But for now, thank you very much for watching, and next week is going to be Survivor Series 1987. We hope to catch you then. Thank you very much, and Instagram, Twitter, all those kinds of things. I'm not doing outros anymore, plugging stuff, because it all gets all mixed up, but thank you for joining us, and thank you, Don, for entertaining and enlightening us once again.
Defending myself from slander from Greg Valentine. I was a better Intercontinental champion too, and better looking.
Put his telephone number out now. I'll put it on YouTube so I can ring him and tell him.
Yeah, there we go.
Cheers,
on the bottom, Don. Flashing across. I'll wear it on my next shirt.
Cheers, Don.
All right, aloha. Have a good week, everybody.